It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Donald Trump deletes his Truth Social declaration that he has just spoken to President Vladimir Putin for an hour and a quarter. Or maybe he didn't, and that's why he's deleted it. And support for Israel crashes through the floor in every Western European country. And we'll be asking, how come then the politicians and the media still support them? Death threats to Piers Morgan from his former friends in the Israel camp. And in Gaza, the killing, the slaughter goes on. The Hunger Games, where people are lured in promise of food only to be mowed down by machine gun and tank fire. It is a new depth of depravity, and we'll be talking to an eyewitness to it all in the second half of the show. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
3.99 million people watched the mother of all talk shows last Wednesday and last Sunday, with the Sunday number still advancing. It's very likely that it will breach 4 million. I mention it because the polls that we run, the programs that we are having, the impact that they are making around the world is beginning to be significant. I can feel it in my everyday life. The number of people, I was just in London a day ago, and the number of people who came up to me to talk about our broadcasts was at an altogether new level, a new high. I mentioned that for reasons which will become clearer in a few minutes. But let's start with the very peculiar business that's happened in the last few minutes. Donald Trump put very well parsed with capital letters in the proper place, no misspellings, no syntax error, so I assume that it was written by someone else, a report of the 1 hour, 15-minute conversation he had this afternoon with Vladimir Putin. Don't get me wrong, I'm very glad that he did, if he did. I'm very glad. I wish the two men would speak more often. There's no need, though, to make a tweet about it or even a Truth Social pronunciamento, and that might be the problem. It may be that Donald Trump's summary, on the face of it, a fair and definitely not vainglorious one, went too far or didn't go far enough for the Russian side. It might be that the Russians never agreed to any tweeting about the contents of the conversation. But Donald Trump's Truth Social post disappeared literally moments ago. It has been deleted. We can all speculate, perhaps fruitfully or not, on why that is. The most important thing is that the call took place, and in it, President Putin made clear that he, and Trump said, he said so very strongly, that he would be responding to the egregious attack in breach of all nuclear weapons treaties signed between the United States and Russia, the attack on the nuclear bombers in various air bases of the Russian Federation. This is important because the world is waiting with bated breath for that response. Will it be nuclear? Will it be Orishnik? Will it be an attack on the decision-making centers and personnel of the rump state of Ukraine? Will it be something we've never seen or even thought of before? Will it be an attack not just on Ukraine, but on the NATO powers that undoubtedly lay behind it? There is no way that this 18-month operation, which came to its fruition at the weekend, was mounted by Ukraine alone, because it depended upon satellite information, and Ukraine has no satellites. Somebody who does have a satellite gave them the information that they needed to target the drones that hit 4, perhaps 5 of Russia's nuclear bombers. I can answer one point that was raised last week. Why were nuclear bombers not under hard shell covering? Why were they sitting out on the tarmac? It turns out that this is a requirement of the nuclear weapons treaties between Russia and the United States, that both countries will leave their nuclear bombers in plain sight of each other's satellites. So Russia was observing the letter of the nuclear agreements with the United States, but the United States was not observing to the letter or anything else its obligations under those treaties to Russia, because the United States undoubtedly knew that the Ukrainians had been planning for 18 months to launch this attack on these nuclear bombers. Now, 18 months, for those of you who can do arithmetic, was in the presidential period of Joe Biden, though Joe himself would probably not have known that. But his auto pen knew that. He knew from the beginning that this operation, which is a breach of the nuclear treaty obligations between the two countries, was in the pipeline. Donald Trump, though, has been in since January, and it is now June, though in my country at least, it sure doesn't feel like it. The 5 months, nearly 6, that Donald Trump has been the president have been an improvement in terms of attitude towards the Ukraine war, but it has been hot and cold. 1 minute, he is the man that campaigned as the peace president who was going to end the Ukraine war in a day, in an afternoon, in an hour, with a phone call. Pick your hyperbole. But he hasn't done any of that. He did stop briefly the supply of weapons, and he did stop briefly the supply of intelligence, only to reinstate both of them. So hot and cold on Ukraine is the best description of the Trump presidency so far. But it begs the question that we are asking in the poll tonight. Did Trump okay the Ukraine attacks on Russia? Yes or no? But this is a trick question, you see. Because if Trump did not okay them, then the people that work for him in the deep state are taking him for a potentially existential ride. Now, Donald likes a ride, but he has no intention, I believe, of seeing the end of humanity, the end of the United States of America in a nuclear conflagration with a nuclear-armed hypersonic superpower. The alternative answer to the question is that he did not okay it, that he was hoodwinked by the people who were operating a Biden-era plan, didn't tell him, in which case Donald Trump is not really the president, definitely not the commander-in-chief, and is being fooled with the wool pulled over his eyes by his own operatives. A clue to that being the proper explanation, the accurate explanation, is that no sooner had Mike Pompeo, the formerly fat controller of the CIA, now a lean and hungry killer, and Lady Lindsey Graham, the senator for South Carolina, who incidentally spent $413,000 of American public money on his hotel accommodation in Kiev. Now, I've lived in Kiev. You can get the best hotel suite in the entire city of Kiev. You can get a 4-girl, 10-girl, 20-hand massage and live the life of Riley in Kiev for $500, not $413,000. But that's what Lindsey Graham did. And his fellow senator, Blumenthal, spent even more, $460,000 for a weekend in Kiev. That's a lot of blow. That's a lot of blow jobs. That is a lot of corruption. Because who signed off the expenses run up by both men? Well, somebody called Lindsey Graham, who is the chairman of the Budget Committee. So the US taxpayer paid $1 million almost in one weekend to 2 senators to go abroad and breach the Logan Act, which forbids US officials to travel abroad in order to sabotage the policy of the sitting President of the United States. And there can't be many people who don't believe that that's exactly what they did. Senator Graham mocked President Trump, despite Trump openly supporting Graham in his now hotly contested primary race to be the Republican candidate in the upcoming Senate elections. He said, "Some say that you have no cards, but you've got lots of cards." And no sooner had he said it than the attack on the nuclear bombers began. He mocked President Trump, and he undoubtedly undermined the stated policy of the American president of negotiating an end to this war. Blumenthal and Graham both exhorted the Ukrainian state to still more ferocious fighting and taking the war directly to the Russians rather than seeking to defend the territory in Ukraine that they still currently hold. Now, these trips by American officials, Mike Pompeo and Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal, Senator Blumenthal, these were wrecking, sabotaging efforts. Of that there is no doubt. And Donald Trump is yet to make any comment on it. And I, for one, await that comment anxiously. But there's no doubt that the satellite that guided the drones to their target in the nuclear air bases was an American satellite. That much I can tell you for free. There is no doubt that the British government were involved in the entire matter also. And that's why it's important now for the United States to openly break with their former European allies on the subject of Ukraine. Donald Trump may have done so in the call this afternoon. I wish that that were so. But he's going to have to do it publicly because the former allies of the Americans, the French, the British, the Germans, little Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, are all turning up the dial for more war. And that's an existential threat to all of us. Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, who reached rock bottom levels of public approval in the polls this week, falling to 12% approval. 12% approval. Was nonetheless out on the podium announcing dramatic new postures. And postures is, for the moment, exactly what they are. That Britain is now on a war footing. That his mission is to get Britain war ready. War ready for war with Russia, the possessor of the largest number of nuclear weapons in the world. This, as the Prime Minister of a country that is literally going down the drain. It is in a state of economic, social, and cultural paralysis and crisis. He cannot stop a dinghy bringing military-aged young men sailing across the English Channel and landing on the beaches thereafter for an indeterminate time of years, costing the rest of us £220 per day in hotel accommodation alone. But he's going to fight the Russians. He can't smash the gangs, but he's going to smash the Russians. He can't smash the organized criminals who are sailing these poor, hapless refugees, illegal migrants, whatever you're going to call them. But he's going to stop the largest army in Europe, battle-hardened after all this time, at the battlefront in Ukraine. And little Rutte made a fool of himself this afternoon. He said that NATO is more powerful than the Roman Empire and more powerful than the Napoleonic Empire. Now, people who think they're Napoleon are quite commonly found in Ward 5 at Broadmoor and other similar institutes for the criminally insane. It's odd that the General Secretary of NATO should choose Napoleon of all people as an exemplar of his military prowess, although Mark Rutte has never fired a gun in anger in his puff, if you get my meaning. But the vainglory of that statement shows the scale of the problem that we have. These runts, Rutters and runts, in London, in Paris, in Brussels, and in Berlin, are dragging us to Armageddon. And Donald Trump has to stop it. He has to put these puppets back into their boxes. He has to tell them that they can no longer go around the world threatening people with America's army, because America's army ain't coming. America is butting out of the Ukraine war. That'll bring it to a close quite quickly, if I'm any judge. I want to move on only because I have an important issue that we must discuss. It is the YouGov Eurotrack survey, a massive survey, not by MOATS, but by YouGov, a pro-NATO, pro-EU, pro-Israel polling company. YouGov Eurotrack survey has just shown that the bottom has fallen out of the market so far as Israel in Western Europe is concerned. Here are the figures. In Spain, Israel's standing is at minus 55. In Denmark, minus 54. In Italy, minus 52. In France, minus 48. In the UK, minus 46. And in Germany, which has practically allowed itself to be annexed by Tel Aviv, it's minus 44. And across all 6 countries, just 6 to 16% view Israel's response in Gaza since October 7th as having been proportionate. Now, these figures fill my heart with joy. They square with what we see and hear on social media, on the streets, in protests, in boycotts, in empty McDonald's, in empty Starbucks and all the rest. Squares with that. Makes me very happy to see those figures. For I was in this cause when those figures would have been, at the very least, reversed. But I want to ask a bigger question. Because we all claim, at least, to be democracies, how can it be that the overwhelming majority of the public in Western European countries now despise Netanyahu's Israel, consider them to be conducting wholesale, unjustified slaughter, but the vast majority of politicians in those same Western countries and the vast majority of journalists and broadcasters in those same European countries continue to shill for Israel, continue to arm Israel, continue to roll out a red carpet in every international fora up to and including the Eurovision Song Contest for Israel. How does that work? Why would politicians, who after all depend on people's votes to continue being politicians, why would they fly so dramatically, seismically, in the face of their own public opinion? You've got to ask yourself that question very, very seriously. Because one of the 2 possible answers to it strikes at the very heart of any pretense that we might have of being a democracy. More of that in the next hour and a half and more. It is the mother of all talk shows.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down, the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got blood on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only 1/2 of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published. But actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
I had a great conversation with many of my Patreon friends, as I try to do whenever I can, while I was on the train earlier today. A big thanks to all my Patreon supporters. And as they know, and you need to know, you get all of my films free, gratis, when you support me on patreon.com/George Galloway. When I say support me, I don't really mean me. I get nothing at all from it. This is one of the ways that you can support the mother of all talk shows. Because without your support, it simply cannot continue, at least not twice per week. So please, at the end of this show or sooner, support me on patreon.com/George Galloway and enjoy those films. We've got a poll, of course, this evening. Did Trump okay the Ukraine attacks on Russia? Yes or no? 21,158 people have voted already. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. And I must say, the overwhelming majority on everywhere except X, which is always an outlier, it's a big yes as the answer to that question so far. If you agree or disagree, then get your vote in now, before about 20 minutes to the end of the show. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 08081 196 5522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Now, unfortunately, 40 minutes before the show, we learned from his producer that Glenn Greenwald has taken ill. We wish him all the best for a speedy recovery and look forward to having him on the show at the earliest possible opportunity. However, Scott Ritter is standing in for him, and he'll be on in the second hour, along with Dr. Mohamed, the humanitarian hero, just returned from nearly a year and a half under fire in Gaza. If the British honour system meant anything at all, he'd be there at the palace for a gong. He actually was more likely to be put under arrest at Stansted Airport when he arrived, but more of that later. Let's take some calls, first from Declan in Dublin on Killing Kelly, the film you've just been hearing about. Declan, what would you like to say?
Well, what I want to say about that, and also the Tony Blair film, is people might say that's 22 years ago, okay, which would be a valid point, except for one thing. The crimes, the murders have continued every day since the murder of David Kelly. And Alistair Campbell, and even mentioning the guy's name makes me sick, but Alistair Campbell was pouncing around in the last few days saying that he didn't tell a lie about Iraq. A lie people from their catechism will remember from when they're children is a serious sin, a crime, if it does serious harm to your neighbours. Now, he and his mate Tony Blair and their mates over in America, George Bush, etc., are responsible for, up to the present day, literally millions of deaths and more. In that film, there's a little snippet, and I saw the snippet well before you made the film, of a little girl coming out of her house in a hijab with her hands up as the big brave American soldiers were raiding the house of this little 10-year-old girl, right? Terrified for her life. And I just saw it the other day. I saw it today again, actually, that little snippet. And at one level, little girls like that have suffered. They've Tony Blair and the other characters have so much to answer for. And just before the Iraq War kicked off, the miners were beaten in England. And I say that because Anne Harper, who was formerly married to Arthur Scargill, died there only a few weeks ago. And she was as tough, and her female friends were as tough as any miner, and as good. And what they've done in England is they've destroyed that whole sense of belonging in northern England and elsewhere. The likes of Anne Harper was the real red wall. And the result has been, from Tony Blair, a human sewage and sludge from Tony Blair up to the present day, Starmer in England and his Ukrainian friends, and the same in Ireland, America, and everywhere else. So younger viewers might think those films are irrelevant or historical or whatever, but unfortunately they're very relevant to this day throughout the Middle East and the shenanigans that's going on in Ukraine as well. That's my point.
Well, brilliantly put. Of course, even historical films should be seen, because if you don't know your history, you've no idea why we are where we are. And therefore, if you have no idea why we are where we are, you've no idea where we're going, and you've no idea how to correct that course. But, as you rightly say, actually, it's hardly ancient history, because Tony Blair is still pulling the strings of an equally venal Labour Prime Minister in the form of Sir Keir Starmer today. Sir Kid Starver, Sir Kid Killer, because he's killed a lot of kids, has Keir Starmer, by his green light of Israel's siege of all water, electricity, medicine and humanitarian aid of any kind, which he said Israel had the right to stop, cut off. He killed potentially tens of thousands of little children in Gaza in 2025 and in 2024 before it. So Blair's still around, you know. He hasn't gone away, you know. He's still pulling the strings, you know. And you might as well say you need to know just exactly who is this Tony Blair. Thanks, Declan, for that was not a setup. I assure you I had no idea that Declan was coming on and he was going to mention that. On YouTube, you can scan the QR code now and leave a comment, and I'll try and read them out. Suzanne Burrell says, Trump may have known about it, however, Lindsey Graham, neocons and globalists are running things, not Trump. Well, this is the $64,000 question. I had hoped to ask it of Glenn Greenwald right now, but I will ask it of Scott Ritter, because it's one of these things that Trump is damned if he did and damned if he didn't. If Trump okayed the attack on Russia, then he's too wicked to be the president. And if it happened, despite his presidency, well, he's too weak to be the president. There's no good answer for Donald Trump to the question we are asking in this poll. James Hayden says 18 months of preparation is a clear indication that peace was never wanted to begin with, and Trump definitely knew this. And Nikki A says Brian Belichick says it doesn't matter who the US president is, there is a continuity of agenda. The USA wants full spectrum global dominance. Well, I'm familiar, of course, with Brian, whom I greatly respect, and his somewhat fatalistic attitude to this. I don't myself share it, as I have made clear on many occasions. If you're saying to me it didn't matter whether Jack Kennedy or LBJ were the President of the United States, or whether Bobby Kennedy Sr. or Richard Nixon was the President of the United States, I'm afraid I can't accept that. Joe Escobar, hi Joe, says Western corruption has no limits. Graham and Blumenthal, aka Limpy and Wimpy, are shameless parasites. Joe, I want to know what happened to that $1 million. I mean, is that a fake invoice? Did the hotel give them that back in cash? Did they blow it in industrial quantities of cocaine and hookers? I have no idea what kind of orientation Mr. Blumenthal possesses, but I can well see Senator Graham spending the weekend with a 4-hand massage and accoutrements. But that's a lot of blow. You cannot possibly spend $1 million in a weekend, can you? Or am I old-fashioned? Ola is in Poland. He wants to talk about Palestine and the pole of Western European countries. Ola, welcome back, my friend.
Hello, George. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me on today. On the poll about did Trump okay the Ukraine attack on Russia? Well, for me personally, I think yes. He can either okay it, whether with his silence or with a.
Oh my goodness. We'll get back to him. But I'm not saying Trump knew that this was going to happen. I'm saying he should have known. If he didn't know, he's not in charge. And if he did know and he did it and gave it the okay, then what exactly is he explaining to President Putin in these telephone calls? He can't possibly admit to Putin that he okayed an attack on the nuclear bomber fleet of the Russian Federation. The best he can say is he didn't know it was going to happen, which means that there's effectively a mutiny going on in the deep state of the United States, that the Biden appointees are still in charge, that Donald Trump, for all his braggadocio, is not actually really the president. He's not in charge. That's very damaging for Donald Trump's ego, as well as for the benefit and goodness of the governance of the United States. And he's going to have to assert himself, isn't he? Maybe I'm wrong. A big thanks to all this week's top donors who visited the MOATS.tv website. Dennis Freeman, Matthew Kelly, Anthony Greatrex, Michael Power, and Fadi Echder. Well, a big thanks to all of you. Very generous donations from you this week. Please do become a MOATS donor tonight, even if it's just £1, €1, $1. You need to keep the show going, right? Josh is in California. Wish I was. Josh, what would you like to say?
Hello, George.
Good to see you, my friend. What would you like to say?
Thank you likewise. I was in a TikTok live the other day, and the conversation took a direction that surprised even me. Not only because it presented such an obvious and such a persuasive argument, but because it really shed some light on perhaps the deeper motivations behind the Islamic resistance actions on October 7th. You know, the assertion of the Zionists is that every Palestinian is the enemy. By that logic, all of occupied Palestine is functionally a prisoner of war camp. By that logic, the violations of the Geneva Convention, that are occurring not only now, but have in fact been occurring for almost 80 years, is perhaps the water that the Islamic resistance hoped to lead all of us political horses to on October 7th. Now, again, I can't speak to the intentions or the motivations of the Islamic resistance because I don't represent them directly, right? But to me, it seems like this may be the logic, to force people to examine who the enemy is, who a prisoner of war is, and to draw a direct comparison between occupied Palestine and the camps in Europe where the Geneva Conventions grew out of, essentially.
Well, that may well have been their intention. I don't represent them either directly or indirectly. I don't even support them. They're not my party in the Palestinian arena. That may have been their intention. But the price that's been paid by the Palestinian children is simply enormous. At least 30,000 children have been slaughtered since October the 7th. And at least 150,000 people as a whole have been slaughtered. And half of those, or more than half of those, have been women, because 70% of all those who've been slaughtered have been either women or children. So the Islamic resistance, as you call them, did not actually pay the price for the response that the Israeli state could easily, predictably have mounted. But I saw a man on Piers Morgan last night, about whom I should say something in a minute. I saw Mr. Al-Anouk, a Palestinian who's I've lost count of the number, but it is in the tens, if not in the scores, of members of his family have been slaughtered. And he was asked by Piers Morgan, don't you hold Hamas responsible in any way for the murder of your family? And he answered very clearly, concisely and bravely, I blame Israel and nobody else but Israel for the slaughter of my family members, sisters, their children, their husbands. And if he'd been there, him too. That's, I think, the two sides of this coin. You don't have to believe that an operation on the scale of October 7th was wise, but you do have to accept that it was inevitable. You have to accept that if for nearly 80 years you cage an entire people, those that you haven't already sent spinning across the world as refugees to every continent on the earth, those that you kept in your cage. You can't keep people in a cage for 80 years, generation after generation after generation, and not expect an October 7th. On the contrary, as I said on Piers Morgan, the wonder is that there's not an October 7th every other week or month of that nearly 80 years. Thanks, Josh. Piers Morgan is now being threatened with death by the people that used to worship every barbed, do you condemn Hamas question that he ever asked. He asked it of me, he asked it of everybody that appeared on his show. He didn't just ask it, he barbed it. He put barbed wire around it. He rammed the question down your throat over and over and over and over again. He wouldn't let you breathe without answering that fake question, as Mr. Al-Anouk told them last night. But at least he gave a platform. which no other broadcaster would do to the likes of Bassem Youssef, to the likes of Alanouk, to the likes of me. He gave us a platform, and our success on that platform is reflected in the poll which I began my monologue with earlier this evening. We were able to help make a seismic change in public opinion in Western countries, partly because Piers Morgan gave us an opportunity to do so. Whether he intended that outcome or not, it could be the law of unintended consequences, but the Israeli lobby is raging against Piers Morgan and sending him threats to take him down. I've reported one of the threats to the Metropolitan Police. I hope to hear from you, Chief Inspector. You can't have a man like Piers Morgan publicly threatened on Elon Musk's platform, Twitter, with being destroyed. That would be unfair. Piers Morgan, I'll stand with you in solidarity, though you never stood with me in solidarity or anything else. I've got Ola back from Poland. Ola, we were cut off. Go ahead. Finish your call.
Yes. Okay. I was saying, Trump, whether he okayed it, is either he okayed it by silence or he okayed it by uttering okay to the attack in Russia. That was that about that, in my own opinion. It couldn't have been that he did not know about it. So on the Palestinian issue, I know you are older than me quite a lot, George, and you have seen a lot in the humble life which you have lived. And I would like to ask, because I saw since October 7th, this has been in my mind, and I've been asking people. I saw the, dildo-loving, libido-enhancing rabbi showing people on Twitter the instruction for rape by the Hamas on October 7th. Now, the question I would like to ask you, or probably you can also ask Scott Ritter, who has combat experience. Do men unzip their pants under heavy gunfire from helicopter and, from tanks in a war scenario to be raping Syria the way Israelis talk about it, Syria raping on October 7th? I don't know because I've not seen this. Maybe Scott has experienced men opening their pants to rape women under heavy shelling and fire in a war scenario. That's number one. So,
well, I don't know if they. I don't know. I have to stop you. I don't know if they do. What I do know is that did not happen on October the 7th. I know that because the Israeli police told me that. The Israeli police have publicly stated they have no reports of rape from anybody who was raped. They have no evidence at all from forensic examination of dead women that any of them were raped. It is a part of the hoax that the fighters baked babies in ovens, beheaded children, serially raped women. It was all a bright, shining lie. It was all to dazzle you and everybody else into acquiescing to the mass murder and mayhem which was then unleashed on the defenseless people of the Gaza Strip. Thomas is in the Netherlands on NATO. Let's hear from him. Thomas, welcome. What would you like to say?
Thank you very much, George. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. By the grace of God, good. Thank you.
As well, alhamdulillah. So there's 4 things I want to mention and 2 things I would love for you to have a look at. I'm Dutch, and Rutte used to be our prime minister for a long time, despite many scandals and such. And I think during an earlier call, it was you or the caller that said something about the importance of learning from history. And Rutte is actually a history teacher. And he continued to teach while he was prime minister even. And we shouldn't draw the line just at education. It's apparently not enough because, you know, you can be informed and still decide to do the wrong thing, right? Or decide to view things through a rather chauvinist lens. But that's one point. The second point I wanted to mention is that the Israeli lobby in the Netherlands, which is always a silent partner in wars in the Middle East, is very strong. And they're actually going to show this Israeli propaganda film called October 8th. This, like, I can't call it anything else but Nazi propaganda in the cinemas here. And it's not just about Hamas, no, it's about college campuses, etc., and that whole propaganda line. Now, that's not what I want you to investigate. These two things I want you to investigate. One, there was a Dutch article in a major newspaper in the Netherlands a few years ago, 2021, I think, and there had been an internal investigation in the Dutch military to neo-Nazi tendencies. And this article describes how this was quite obviously sabotaged by the Dutch military, and that despite obvious findings that, you know, there are very obvious threats of these tendencies, there has not been any questions about it in Parliament, any not even a mention after this article, nothing, and it's very strange. The other thing I want to mention is indeed the Napoleon thing, and that he said, like, NATO is as strong as the Roman Empire. It's these kinds of, like you said, criminally insane, like power-hungry maniacs that have this obsession with conquering Russia, and I just don't understand how we can, for the so many of generation, let our children be sent off like this. It's heartbreaking.
Although neither Rome nor Napoleon conquered Russia, of course, so it was inapt as well as a piece of really quite chilling, as I called it, braggadocio. I mean, what's your point? That you're Julius Caesar or that you are Napoleon? You are nothing. You are a failed, politically bankrupted former prime minister of a tuppence halfpenny country, with all respect to you and my good wife, who comes from there. So I actually know quite a bit about the Netherlands, and quite a bit, more than I'd like to know, about Tutti Rutti, Rutti Frutti, I think they call him there. The idea that a jumped up little nyaf who looks like he's sewn into these suits that they've provided him with for his big salary, like a child's onesie. This little man posing as Caesar, posing as Napoleon, is shaking his fist at a country which smashed the attempts of Rome and Napoleon to conquer Russia, and has been fighting for more than 2 years against the entire might of first Stoltenberg, then little Rutte, his best efforts. 25, 35 countries have been trying to destroy Russia, to try and break it up, balkanize it, exploit it, suck its blood, and they have spectacularly failed. And they now find themselves with an American president in power who seems to have better relations with President Putin than he does with Mark Rutte. He does with little Macron or Keir Starmer. So this is a very significant turnaround for them. They are having to come to terms with the fact that they have no more weapons meaningfully to give. Their public opinion cannot possibly tolerate them sending their men. MOATS said today, when asked about the latest demand from Zelensky for more Patriot defense systems, he said, we cannot spare any more Patriot defense systems for Ukraine. We need them for ourselves. All of these countries have emptied their armories, have bankrupted their economies in a failed project. No wonder they're finding it so difficult to relinquish it. No wonder they're finding it so difficult to admit that they are guilty of such a grotesque and gigantic error of judgment that their fitness for office is surely completely now null and void. So, with all respect to the people of the Netherlands, and all respect to the people of Norway, or Slovenia, or other members of the NATO alliance, you are not even a collection of half a dozen US states' National Guards together. Without the United States, there is no NATO. Without the United States taxpayer paying for your suits, little runt, you wouldn't even be there. You certainly wouldn't be living the life that you are currently living. The British, as I frequently say, have a navy that is currently laughingstock. You can announce you're going to build 12 new nuclear submarines, but that will be many, many, many years from now, if the British economy can pay for them, which presently it cannot. You can say that you are going to build, as Starmer said, 6 new weapons factories. You might as well have given the location. I mean, how long would they survive? You can announce you're going to make 6 new weapons factories in a country that doesn't produce any steel, will have to import the steel for the weapons from other countries. When you are a country surrounded by water, which now has no meaningful shipbuilding capacity left at all, when you are a country that is riven from top to bottom with such hatred that you are the most hated prime minister ever in the history of the country, and you're going to put us on a war-fighting basis, you and whose army? Keith, you won't even be the prime minister switching on the Christmas tree lights in Downing Street at the end of this year. Mark my words. Look, coming up is a really special guest, Dr. Mohamed Alsakka. It says here is a doctor and humanitarian, but he is a doctor emeritus, and he is a humanitarian who should be getting a Nobel Peace Prize. After this break, you'll get to admire him just as much as I do. Stay tuned.
There's a group of people in Twitter who are daily posting discussions about Gaza, Lebanon, what's happening, news updates, aid for Gaza, and trying to enlist the help of Jordan and France and any other regional entity that will help get more aid into Gaza and all of Gaza, all of Palestine, for everyone who suffers. So I want to request that everyone who is listening to this go to your local council meetings and peacefully request that their representatives at the local levels do this, because it works.
Thanks for the call, Pia, in Uruguay. I'm a free man of the city of San Francisco, awarded to me for my work on Palestine, on the steps of City Hall itself. So it was a particular delight for me that the San Francisco Council voted by 8 votes to 3 to demand a ceasefire. And that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of campaigning to force the local authority representatives to vote.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So, in the absence through illness of the great Glenn Greenwald, we had to quickly rejig the show, and we've got 2 guests coming up in quick succession. First is Dr. Mohamed Alsakka, second is Scott Ritter. So, there'll be fewer calls in the second half of the show, but do keep calling, and if possible, we'll get back to you. Did Trump okay the Ukraine attacks on Russia? Yes or no? Almost 25,000 people now have voted, and most people say yes. A very interesting outcome indeed. Dr. Mohamed Alsakka recently returned to the United Kingdom after a staggering 16 months, I think, under fire, working in the hospitals in Gaza. He did not get a hero's welcome from the British state. There was no bunting for him hung at Westminster. But for those who know, he earned a place in everybody's heart and memory forever. And I'm proud to say he joins us now. Dr. Mohamed, very big welcome to you, and salute on behalf of every person who watches this show for the heroism and dedication to humanity that you and your colleagues in these hellholes they used to call hospitals in Gaza over this last period. But don't make me speak for you. You tell us what it was like, where you were, for how long, and what the conditions were that you experienced.
Thanks a lot, George, for having me on the show. And I'm very grateful to all your listeners and those who've been supporting myself and the team throughout the journey in Gaza. So let me introduce myself. As you rightly said, my name is Dr. Mohamed Alsakka. I'm an A&E consultant, works in the NHS. That's not the first time visiting Gaza. In fact, I have done so back in 2008 and then 2013, 2014 in Hebron, Nablus. Plus, I have survived the war, the second Gulf War. I was in Kuwait at the time. So I do have a background of an experience, working or living in a war zone. However, what's happening in Gaza is just beyond anyone's experience, anyone's imagination. I would even challenge the authors of horror books and science fictions to be able to describe the suffering and the atrocity and the brutality that takes place in Gaza, especially in 2025, where we're watching it live, and it's still continuous. So my journey started over a year ago, back in February. I was just like anyone else, just watching what's happening through the TV, and I couldn't be quiet. And I felt I need to be part of this. And I made my first contact with an NGO, and I was chosen among many doctors as in being needing specialty in Gaza. So I've served at the European Hospital. Initially, I've worked for about 5 5 weeks. And then I returned back to the UK for about a week or 10 days. And I just couldn't take it. I was like, that's it, it's just going to be a one-way journey, and I'm going back. I'm sticking up with the people. I can't just be quiet. So within about 10 days, I returned back to Gaza, and I've been since. So it comes to about a total of 16 months. During that time, initially I was working at the European hospital up until it was evacuated. I stayed on that black night, I would call it. It was myself and a doctor and about 4 nursing staff. We've done our duty. We've been given the option of leaving, but we decided as long as people are around and patients are in the hospital, we have decided to stay. I'm sure you've all heard testimony from other doctors. I'm just going to mention briefly what happened in the last night, or the night of evacuation, or the black night, as I call it. It has become a red zone, the European hospital, an order of evacuation from the IOF. Most of people, patients, they fled the hospital. We stayed in the emergency room. And then just after midnight, an active military operation started taking place. And patients were coming in just vast numbers. They were just thrown on the floor, and you just have to deal with it. It's like throwing yourself in the middle of the ocean, and you need to start swimming. As simple as that. And the type of injuries that we were seeing, it was, you can't even describe them, or it will take you a while to describe them. And that's all down to the type of arms they are using. And I'll be honest to yourself and to the public, and even the patients that I was seeing, I was expecting to see militant, young age, middle age group type of people or patients or casualties, but none of that. They were all elderlies, women, children, and there are the circumstances that you have to work under is just beyond imagination. Lack of resources, lack of equipment, lack of medications. And we have just come to a point where we give each patient about 5 minutes of our time. You either make it or you don't. The surgical procedures that we have done or performed, they were all unsterilized. With the same knife, we use it on 2 different patients or even more. And many of these cases, they would have survived, and with no doubt, they would have had a better outcome if we just had the basic facilities. And then after I evacuated from the European hospital, and I felt like there's something more, that can be done. We've established a field hospital in the middle area of Gaza called Deir al-Balah. And then after, and that's really amazing, and this is the best part out of my whole journey. I got introduced to an amazing activist from the UK, Shameen Solomon and Sarah Wilkinson. They are pro-Palestinians for many years. And then we formed a team together. And then we started helping the people, supporting their resilience by implementing sustainable projects that will restore people dignity, if you like. So the work that we focused on were digging water wells. And I remember the first time we started such a project, it was in Khan Yunis. And we were approached by the Red Cross, and we have been told we have to get a GPS approval from the IOF, which, we just said, well, look, we don't need permission from anyone to tell us what to do in our land for our people. And that was the start. In total, and as you probably know, the sources of water almost I'm mentioning, I think there's over 70 to 80% of water resources that have been damaged by the IOF. And this is where the idea came from. So we started digging water wells. We have done in total 18 of them throughout Gaza. Some of them, they were demolished, and many of them, they are still providing water for thousands and thousands of people. And then alongside this, we did what we call, or we initiated what we call a hospital at home team. So we provide medical cares to the people in the very eastern part of Gaza. Their transportation is impossible. They are often in a red zone area, unreachable. So with our team, we were able to provide medical care for them. During my time, the stories are completely endless. The tragedy is beyond description. We survived, and we decided as a team, to target mainly the places where the NGOs and other organizations are unable to, and mainly to promote people resilience. And we have done so in the second, third evacuation of Khan Yunis. I was in there. We refused to leave. But sadly, with the fourth evacuation, which I think the order came into place about 3 weeks ago, we as a team decided to remain in Khan Yunis and support the people as much as we can, and mainly with the water. We have done so up until last week, where the airstrike became just very... I need to be careful, how I phrase it, but I was going to use the word random, but they are not random at all, so I would say it became more heavy. And then the people now have been pushed to Al-Mawasi area in Khan Yunis. There is no place for people at all. I don't know. I think the majority, they just spending the nights on the streets. And as we say, they spending the night in the middle of nowhere, literally. So I decided, I think it's time to come to speak to you guys, give you a good insight of how brutal and unjustified and horrible this war is. And I've made my contact with the British Embassy, and within 48 hours, 72 hours, I was evacuated. And then I left the team behind, and unfortunately 3 members of, I don't call them a team members, I call them a family. So 3 of our family members, they got shot today by a drone in Khan Yunis. And this is the life of the Palestinians. And unfortunately, you know, life has no meaning at all. You will find someone in the morning, a minute later, you know, he will be struck. There's no safe place in Gaza. I mean, as they're speaking now, you imagine they're saying they've made an order of evacuation to Khan Yunis, and today they're burning tents in the what's supposed to be the humanitarian zone. So it appears what they say on the media is something, and what is on the ground is something completely different. But this is
I wanted to ask you, Doctor, about these so-called humanitarian zones. I referred earlier to a kind of bloody, murderous version of Hunger Games, where people are being lured on the promise of food to areas that are purportedly safe, and then murdered in large numbers. Not the odd 1 or 2, but huge numbers of people are being fired upon. What is the game there? How can that possibly be justified by anyone? I mean, I saw Piers Morgan talking to an Israeli shill about it last evening, and she actually denied that it was happening, but we actually can see it happening.
It's not that you can see it happening, it is actually happening in the worst ever existing scale. And trust me, the worst type of weapon that can be used is food, because it's something that is continuous, that hurts you and you can feel it. And they have used it in Gaza at a really very high, disgusting scale, as they say. And let me tell you something. I have witnessed on a couple of occasions when the IOF, they ring member of the public in a particular area, they pre-warn them to, they're going to strike, let's say, this building. And they do specify exactly which one. And I even have videos where they're speaking to them directly, and they are naming the people on the street. And even on two occasions, there's one they refused to strike because they specifically said, they even knew what the gender was. They said there's a female on the 3rd floor, she needs to evacuate. And on another occasion, it was a dog. They said, you all have left the dog behind, get the dog out, and then they strike. So what I'm trying to say is they know exactly who they killing and slaughtering. There's nothing random, and nothing happens just by accident in Gaza. So all these innocents' life that they get burned and shot and amputated and decapitated, they're not happening just by accident or while they were targeting a person, and even that doesn't justify it. They know exactly who they're killing. They know exactly who they're targeting. And I started by saying, what you hear on the media is something, and what is it on the ground is something else. I.e., they've evacuated the eastern part of Khan Yunis. They pushed all the people to what they call a humanitarian zone in Al-Mawasi area, in the western part, and yet they get burned alive and they get killed. They have said what they called a humanitarian aid for Gaza, and allegedly, they will be distributing food to people. But what we have seen on the ground, they're stripping people out of their dignity. They're spreading fear and hatred and everything among the people, and the weapon they're using is hunger. And these people, they've taken the risk. They know the chance of being killed, it's extremely high, and yet they're making that journey. Do you know why? Because their kids are crying out of hunger, because their wives are crying out for hunger, because they themselves they're hungry. And what is heartbreaking and what is even more disgraceful, that we are watching this and we're doing nothing about it. You know, we keep saying, oh, next week we're waiting for a ceasefire agreement. Oh, tomorrow we're waiting, you know, for Witkoff, you know, to, I don't know, make some changes over the agreement. But what we're forgetting is what is happening in Gaza is continuous on secondly basis, hourly basis. The condition that the people forcefully have been living in is disgraceful to their humanity, to be honest. This is how I describe it.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. Doctor, how can people follow your work? How can they support you? Are you going on a speaking tour? Give us some details.
So, as I said, we have established rebuildgaza24.com. It's a good website. It tells the journey. It's up to date with our work on the ground. Part of supporting the Palestinian resilience is developing that social network with them and us. We have an excellent team on the ground. We will continue focusing on, at the time being, we're doing some food packages for the Palestinians now. But in the meanwhile, we will continue digging more water wells, more desalinization centers. And this group is formed by you guys, by the British public, by the British people, and you can make a difference to the Palestinians. And the last thing that I want to tell the public, you know, please continue going out on strikes. My feelings when I was in Gaza, when I hear when I hear you talking, George, and when I see the people, you know, protesting, it just makes us, lift our spirit up, makes us feel not being forgotten when, unfortunately and sadly, the Arab world has forgotten completely about the Palestinians.
Well, you'll never be forgotten. Dr. Mohamed Alsakka, Dr. Humanitarian, and I hope Nobel laureate. Thank you for the heroic efforts that you have made and for the very difficult task of appearing on television tonight when 3 of your dear colleagues, your family members, have only just been gunned down. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let me take a quick break because coming up in 10 minutes is the one and only Scott Ritter. Your calls, though, first after this break. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Yeah. The podcast is once again in the top 10 in South Africa and Morocco. We're building a consistent, huge listenership there. We're in the top 30 in New Zealand and Ireland over the last few days also. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Did Trump okay the Ukraine attacks on Russia? Yes or no? Well, we'll be asking Scott about that in just a few minutes. But you've got a chance to register your say on the poll, but only for about another 20 minutes or so. Let's go to George in New York on Palestine. We are the global university of the airwaves, after all. George, welcome. What would you like to say?
Yes, thank you for taking my call, George. Just a couple of comments on, the whole Gaza extermination that's taking place. Of course, it certainly is pretty much apparent, I think, to most rational people that what's going on here is a campaign of extermination. And, as an American, I'm ashamed of what my country is doing because we're as culpable as the Israelis for carrying out this extermination. The only thing that's been accomplished, in addition to the fact that tens of thousands and thousands of people have been killed, many of them non-combatants that people would consider non-combatants, children, older men, women. The only thing that it's accomplished is generations and future generations of Palestinians and other Arab peoples' hatred of the state of Israel. I kind of bring this up not because I want to see any kind of retribution, but, what was seen in the past is the fact that the Arab people, if nothing else, have been shown to be resilient, have been shown to be tenacious. They will keep coming back at you. I fear another 9/11 here in the States because that's always a distinct possibility. Remember, being resourceful is another, characteristic of people from the Arab world. I mean, they took down the Twin Towers with just box cutters. 19 men commandeering 4 commercial jetliners with box cutters, and they caused quite a bit of damage to the United States. And I do not want to see this happen, but this is my fear. There are generations now that are going to be, I don't even know if Israel will continue to exist. In a way, I kind of hope it does. I have Jewish friends, and I'm not anti-Semitic any more than I'm anti-American for speaking out against my country for supporting this genocide.
Very well said, George. There may not be another 9/11. Maybe another 9/11 will be manufactured to obtain the consent for some horrific further purpose, giving another twist to the cycle of nihilistic violence and terror. I was in Manchester earlier this morning, and I gazed upon a memorial to the massacre of the innocents at the Ariana Grande concert in the Manchester Arena some years ago. Now I hope nobody considers it to be wallowing in history. These little girls are on my mind, and the victims of terrorism are always on my mind. But it isn't only us that suffers terrorism. If you bring down a tower in Gaza, killing women and children, men who are completely uninvolved in October 7th, you are a terrorist. If you deny a child a drink of water, so that she suffers, perchance to die, you are a terrorist. If you deny a piece of bread, if you deny sanitation, if you deny medical treatment, if you deny medicine, if you deny equipment for doctors in hospitals, you are a terrorist. The terrorist is not just the guy with the beard in the Tora Bora. The terrorist can be wearing a suit and soft shoes as he shuffles the dance on the graves of the innocents. Thank you for that call. George, a big shout out now to tonight's top donors who've been on to the MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Clive Hewlett, James Brogan, Caroline Purnell, Adrian Rosso, and William Howard. Big thanks to each and every one of you who is going to give in the course of the next couple of hours. Let's take a call from Gerardo in Glasgow on Palestine. Go ahead, Gerardo. Gerardo, are you there? He just dropped off. Comments. Merlin says, the Zion Nazis threatening Pierre's life is absolutely delicious irony. Who's the bad guy now, Pierce? Is Hamas threatening your life, Pierce? Well, yeah, I understand your feelings on that. I mean, hey, he tapped my telephone, yeah? He was a mate of mine and he was tapping my telephone. So I understand how you feel. But we mustn't be churlish. We must be bigger than that. The war machine of Netanyahu and the fascistic crimes committed by it have driven Piers Morgan across the fence to our side. Let's try and make him welcome. Tam McIntosh says Morgan has never once asked any of his Israeli guests if they condemn Israel. And Danny Hell says, Dr. Mohammed is a legend and a hero. Thank you for everything that you do. And Lorraine Tullett says, what a man Dr. Alsakka is, along with all the other doctors and nurses in Gaza. Heroes all. Shockwave Truth sends $10. Thank you for that. Russia is attacking military targets with global media present, but they are the barbaric savages. Israel kills women, children, doctors, journalists, and its own, yet they are executing a moral war. Now, just before the break, a quick mention that tomorrow night, No to NATO, No to War have a live show, Kneecap and Israel, with Patrick Walsh and Hassan Ullah. Starts at 9 p.m. London time, and you can watch it on my YouTube channel, on Rumble, X, and Facebook channels too. Quick break, and then it's the legendary Scott Ritter, former Marine Corps intelligence officer, weapons inspector, and all-round sage on matters of the politics of war. Stay tuned, I'll be right back.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Vicious says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Eight minutes left on the poll. Did Trump okay the Ukraine attacks on Russia? Yes or no? 25,000 votes in so far. Let's see how Scott Ritter, our esteemed guest, might have answered that question. Welcome, Scott. Thanks for joining us, digging us out of a hole as you've done before. I'm grateful indeed to you. Did Trump okay the Ukraine attacks on Russian nuclear bombers?
I don't speak highly of Donald Trump very often, but I don't think he's that stupid. I believe that he is sincere in his desire to see a cessation of hostilities, even if he's unrealistic in his expectations of what he can demand of Russia. But I think he also understands that what the Ukrainians did was deeply provocative and unsettling and disruptive. And so I don't see that he would approve this. Now, this doesn't mean that the United States wasn't involved. I do believe that President Trump has, as many presidents have had, a CIA problem. And that problem lends itself to Donald Trump's failure of leadership. You know, he inherited a policy from the Biden administration that sought the strategic defeat of Russia. He has not ended that policy. He may not even know that it is a policy, but, you know, he has not formally come out and said, I declare this policy to be at an end, which means that all of the covert actions that were attached to that policy that were being carried out by the CIA using the 20 bases that were built on Ukrainian soil, most of them during the time of Donald Trump's first term in office, and all of which were involved in organizing and executing covert operations against the Russian target. This CIA is still on the job. They have to be ordered to stand down, and they haven't been ordered to stand down. And even if they have been ordered to stand down, what we've seen in the past is that many of them refuse to stand down, believing that they know better than the sitting president about what's good for American security. So there's no doubt in my mind that there were CIA fingerprints together with MI6, the British Secret Intelligence Service, who I believe had the lead on this operation. There's no doubt that they were involved, but I am very skeptical of whether or not Donald Trump was cognizant of this and if he gave the green light.
Well, I agree with you, but that doesn't end the question, does it? Because it's either that Donald Trump is stupid and did okay it, or that he's not in command of the United States Armed Forces and its agencies. That he's not, in fact, the commander-in-chief, no matter how many times they play it on the trumpet. And either way, we've got a problem, don't we?
We have a huge problem. It's not just that Donald Trump can't control the intelligence community. He can't control the American foreign policy establishment. He has the United States Senate, and two senators in particular, Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal, committing sedition, flying to Ukraine, conspiring with the Ukrainian government to enact policies on the part of the Ukrainian government that are designed to be disruptive of the declared intent of the President of the United States to bring an end to this conflict through negotiated settlements. The President, let's be clear about this. Again, I'm not often complimentary of this President, but the pressure that he has put on Russia is unrealistic as the expectations attached to this pressure are. Did have Russia agree to a process that Russia knows is unrealistic, but Russia doesn't want to be seen as walking away from this process out of concern over, alienating Donald Trump. So Russia agreed to the Istanbul process. Russia agreed to the second round of the Istanbul process, and Russia has done everything the president has asked of them in terms of process and procedure. So Donald Trump deserves credit for this. But what's not happening is that Donald Trump is not being backed up by his own cabinet. Marco Rubio is out literally alienating those who should be supporting the president. He makes contradictory statements. So does Keith Kellogg. So does Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. J.D. Vance is confused about what Donald Trump wants with Ukraine, apparently, because he issues contradictory statements. Tulsi Gabbard is unable to bring her agencies under control. She has a rogue CIA right now just doing whatever the heck they want to do. And, even people like Steve Witkoff, who I think has emerged as a very sage and capable negotiator, who understands the reality on the ground. He goes forth believing he's carrying out the directions of Donald Trump, gathering information, bringing it back, and only to be undercut by Trump and Trump's cabinet. This is a dysfunctional foreign policy and national security team led by a dysfunctional president.
Indeed so. Now, you mentioned sedition. It's a strong word, but it's hard to see how the $1 million jamboree to Kiev, and you and I have been in Kiev. We both know it's hard to spend $1 million there, at least legally. That trip to Kiev was a treason, because it was a senator openly ridiculing the president's policy, the comments about the cards and so on. And he's in the same party as the president. The president has endorsed him in a contested primary election, and it's a breach, surely, of the Logan Act, which is supposed to preclude this kind of thing.
100%. And that's why I use the word. I don't like to use that word, and I wouldn't use it lightly. But his actions literally fit the definition of sedition. Moreover, the 80-plus senators who are signing on to this bill need to be careful as well, because if Trump ever had the courage to pull the trigger on the sedition charges and the Logan Act violations, then these senators could be charged with conspiracy to commit sedition, because they are conspiring with Lindsey Graham to achieve an outcome that is detrimental to the national security interests of the United States, as defined by the only person who gets to make that decision. The Senate gets to advise and provide consent for certain aspects of foreign policy. They don't get to make foreign policy, and they don't get to implement foreign policy, and they damn sure don't get to negotiate foreign policy on behalf of the United States. This is what Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal did on behalf of 80 other senators who have come together to undermine the legitimacy of this president.
So they spoke for an hour and 15. Trump, perhaps ill-advisedly, put out a truth social on it and then deleted it. The Russians, so far as I can see, although I've been on the air for the best part of 2 hours now, have not said anything officially. Trump, to be fair, said in the post now deleted that it wasn't going to bring immediate peace, but he acknowledged, didn't he, implicitly, that Putin is going to respond to the egregious terrorist attack on the train and the egregious breach of essential nuclear protocols in the attack on the nuclear bombers. You know better than anyone, as a distinguished weapons inspector, these planes were out on the tarmac uncovered because that's what the treaty requires them to be. And taking advantage of that, using British and American intelligence resources to do so, Putin's going to respond bigly, as Donald Trump might say. What do you think he's going to do?
Well, first of all, let's underscore the seriousness of what happened. This isn't just a cool operation. I mean, come on, hats off to the Ukrainians. This is made for TV stuff. Year and a half in the planning, smuggling guys in, getting a warehouse, buying trucks, converting the trucks, loading them up with drones, having retractable roofs, guys controlling it long distance. You could make a James Bond movie out of this, and it would be a very entertaining movie. But for real life, they attacked Russia's strategic nuclear deterrent. Russia has promulgated a nuclear doctrine. The most updated version came out in the fall of last year that says the red lines, which are, if crossed, should trigger a Russian nuclear response, are if a conventional attack using conventional weapons is directed at the command and control or the actual assets linked to Russia's strategic nuclear deterrent, then Russia will treat that as a nuclear attack on their strategic nuclear deterrent, and they can respond using nuclear weapons. Moreover, if a non-nuclear state attacks Russia with conventional weapons in a manner that threatens Russia's existential existence, and they are assisted in this by a nuclear state, Russia has to assume that the nuclear state is the one carrying out the attack, and therefore Russia is cleared to use nuclear weapons. The Ukrainians doing this, if I were a Russian general advising Putin, I would say, look, boss, this is very dangerous because they're setting us up. They're conditioning us. The next time they'll do this, and instead of it just being the Ukrainians, this will be the precursor attack for a larger preemptive attack by our nuclear-armed enemies. So in the future, we have to treat the moment such an attack happens as a nuclear attack and respond accordingly. This is the world we live in. This is a very, very dangerous situation. So this isn't just an act of terrorism. This is an act of nuclear madness. And so Putin must respond. He must respond in a way that deters two actors. One is Ukraine. This response has to be so harsh that the Ukrainian government must know that their lives are at risk if they ever try to do something like this again. And their lives may be at risk now. Dmitry Medvedev has tweeted, "Don't panic. That which needs to be destroyed will be destroyed. Those who need to be eliminated will be eliminated." And I think that's the direction the Russians are going. But more importantly, because Russia will defeat Ukraine no matter what. That's the other thing that come out. There will be no peace deal. There will be no peace process. Vladimir Putin spoke to his National Security Council, and this is going to be resolved on the battlefield through force of arms. And Donald Trump can thank Zelensky and the CIA for this harsh reality. But he needs to send a signal to Great Britain, to France, to NATO, and the United States that if this happens again, the horrible response that they're seeing isn't going to be limited to Ukraine. It will bleed over and impact NATO, Europe, and potentially the United States. I want to remind people that Anatoly Antonov in September of last year made a phone call in which he implicitly told the American official on the other end that if Biden greenlights the use of ATACMS missiles deep into Russia, the Russian response will hit the American homeland, including Washington, D.C. And that's one of the reasons why Biden backed off. I think we're going to get a similar type of statement, perhaps with the Oreshnik missile. Maybe it's time for Russia to pull that out again. Who knows? But it will. I think the response is going to be on a scope and scale that we have never seen before, and it is designed to scare the you-know-what out of Ukraine and its Western allies.
Finally, Scott, if I may change tack and take your counsel, what's going on in the White House in the extraordinary punch-up that developed today between Elon Musk on the big, beautiful bill and the Trumpian blows being struck by Steve Bannon from his war room? Is the coalition that put Donald Trump in power now breaking apart?
It was always destined to break apart. because Donald Trump is not a man of honor, and he's not a man of his word. Donald Trump is incapable of following through with the promises he made during the campaign. Donald Trump is a very weak leader who is heavily influenced by outside powers. The key to Donald Trump is to stroke his ego, not to seek counsel of his conscience, because he has no conscience. He has a huge ego, and the fact that you have to call a bill big and beautiful just shows you how stupid this entire process is. And the fact that Donald Trump is actually contradicting the very things that he's saying, claiming. What happened to the $36 trillion debt? Apparently that doesn't matter anymore. What happened to Doge saving the American taxpayer hundreds of billions of dollars? That doesn't matter anymore. Nothing matters to Donald Trump. He's incapable of fulfilling a promise. And yet the pro-Trumpians, as you call them, the Bannons and others, they have attached themselves to Donald Trump's coattails. So they are there to defend Donald Trump at all costs. I think Elon Musk, I believed in what he was doing. I'm not the biggest Elon Musk fan, but I don't condemn him across the board. I think that he honestly thought that he was doing good, doing a service to the country, and seeking out to make these cuts. And he came to realize that he was just being used by Donald Trump. And when he no longer was effective as a tool, like any tool that's broken, it gets discarded. And that's what's happening to Elon Musk right now. And he's waking up to that reality.
Wow. Scott Ritter, you're an officer and a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Let's take a quick call from Sarah in Manchester before Gayatri joins me for the social media roundup. Sarah, welcome. What would you like to say?
Hi, George. It's we actually know each other. It's Red Sarah from X. I just wanted to come on and say thank you.
Greetings, Sarah. Thanks for calling.
No worries. I just wanted to say thank you for having Dr. Mohamed from Rebuild Gaza on. As everyone's probably heard by now, when he was greeted at the airport the other day, he should have been greeted as a hero, and instead I was met by airport security, because apparently they'd been monitoring my Twitter account and they knew he was coming, and we were given a sectioned off area. Don't fly Stansted is all I'd say. It was absolutely ridiculous. We weren't allowed to show banners, flags to say thank you, and bear in mind this man saved countless lives, and I mean countless lives, along with Shameen Solomon and Sarah Wilkinson, who are being treated like terrorists by our government, who in my opinion should be in The Hague. So I just wanted to say thank you for having him on. Thank you for giving him a voice, and shame on Sky News, ITV and the rest of the journalists, and I'm using air quotes there, who claim to give us the news but actually just spout illegal occupation propaganda. Thank you to you.
I simply turn them off. I turn them down if I'm in the car. When it comes to the news hour, I swiftly turn the volume to zero. I no longer need and certainly don't want to hear their twisted war propaganda treated as news, billed as news. But Dr. Mohamed was so modest about his own efforts and his own achievements. As you rightly say, Sarah, he saved countless lives. A British citizen saved countless lives, and he doesn't even get a welcome at the airport allowed.
It was quite, honestly, George, I was really shocked. I mean, I know I shouldn't be shocked because we all know who our government works for and we all know who the Met Police work for. But like the week before that, Dr. Mohamed mentioned in his interview, obviously Shameen Solomon, who is a human rights activist who has also saved thousands of lives with her activism. She was raided by the Stasi. And as we also know, our Sarah Wilkinson was raided last year and treated like some sort of criminal. So when you live in a country where the humanitarians are being treated like the criminals, and the people who are living in this country and go and murder children in the occupation force and then come back with impunity are celebrated, I think it reflects a lot about who our governments are and who they stand for, which I'm sure you'd agree, Jack.
I do, and with great sadness, when the humanitarians are the criminals and the criminals are fated, you're living in a criminal state, and that's exactly the state we are in. The police are being ruthlessly deployed. Maybe some of them like it, maybe some of them don't, but they don't have any choice. They're being ruthlessly deployed by their political masters. Despite the statistics I gave at the beginning of the show, only 17% of British people describe themselves as supportive of Israel. 17%. Yet they've got the police, the intelligence services, all the politicians, bar a handful, literally a handful, and all of the broadcasters and journalists. You work that out. How can that be? That defies the laws of gravity. Completely defies them. Defies all political science. There's only two possible explanations for this. One is cash, and one is compromised. One is dirty videos, the other is dirty money. That's the only reason that there can be one or other of these two reasons. Because no politician would willfully, endlessly back a cause supported by so few people to their own detriment. No broadcaster or journalist would endlessly trumpet a cause which their readers and viewers abhor for this length of time. Think about it. You can't win with a losing hand. Supporting Israel is a losing hand with the public, who ultimately are the arbiters. Ultimately, the arbiters. So these people are either bought or they're being blackmailed. These are the only two possible reasons for persisting with the kind of madness that, thank God, Piers Morgan has now abandoned. Never thought I'd say it. Morgan is fighting them now on Twitter, fighting like a tiger with them right now, warning them, telling them that he's not going to put up with these threats. He's going to act on it. It's amazing that it's Piers Morgan that's turned and all the others have not. Makes you think, eh, Sarah? Thanks for the call. Now, my good wife Gayatri joins me in the studio for the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So whilst Rutte Frutti, also known as Mark Rutte, was comparing NATO as Napoleon or the Roman Empire, yesterday...
Caligula.
Yes, yesterday on Tuesday, June the 3rd, the Dutch government fell, the cabinet fell, which was triggered by the exit of Geert Wilders. Now he is described as a far-right leader of the PVV, which is the Party for the Freedom, which is not really a party because it doesn't have any members. It only consists of him, Geert Wilders, the leaders. It has no committee, no conferences, nothing really? Of the like. Yes, it's a bit...
Sounds a bit like Farage.
Oh, sounds like it, doesn't it? So he left the coalition coalition government in the Netherlands because the others refused to sign his tough policies on asylum. So when he won the last election and he got the biggest vote in the Netherlands, but still had to make up a coalition government, he promised the Netherlands to have one of the toughest asylum policies, like in Poland, for example. But as this did not come through, a year later he has left it, leaving the Netherlands again in unstable conditions under a caretaker administration of Dick Schoof. So this is peculiar because less than 3 weeks from now, the Netherlands, The Hague, the center of a political circus, will host the NATO summit. It's going to be a huge event, and of course, at this NATO summit, all the leaders are going to be asked to double their spending on a contribution to NATO, double it from 2.5% to 5%. And now the host country is basically without a government.
You couldn't make it up. And Zelensky has been invited.
He has been invited
unilaterally by Rutte.
May I remind you that some 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, the Netherlands held a referendum on Ukraine's, on a partnership with Ukraine, with the EU.
Oh, I'd forgotten
And the
that.
Netherlands, the Dutch people, over 60% overwhelmingly voted against that. So it is funny circus going on in the
That's long
Netherlands.
before the war, of course.
Of course, it was long before the war, but the Dutch people had their opinion.
Wow.
During the referendum. So we are seeing a very interesting dynamic going on amongst the far-right parties in Europe, don't you think? I mean, Geert Wilders had the power, the closest to power you can get in the Netherlands, because coalition governments are kind of the norm in the Netherlands. Like no one really has the majority, so it's always a coalition government, and he had quite the biggest part of it, and now he left it. So what is he playing at? Is he banking?
Presumably banking on even higher vote next time, yeah?
Getting the bigger mandate, and then acting like Trump and other far-right leaders that have succeeded in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, they've succeeded in winning office from time to time, but they don't actually do anything with it.
They don't know.
I mean, what's the difference between MOATS and little soldier Schultz, for example?
No, exactly. And that's
precisely nothing.
No.
The right and left are merely two cheeks of the same backside, as I keep saying, but the same stuff comes out from the middle, in between them. It's the same old. They support the same wars. They support the same economic policies. They support and do the same on all the big issues. So in what sense are they far right? In what sense are they nationalist? In what sense are they sovereigntist? Whereas people like us, we are the real sovereigntists. We say we want Britain to do exactly what Britain decides to do and not be told what to do by anybody else. Neither Washington, nor Brussels, nor anybody else. We'll do what's in our best interest to do. Oh, if European governments could actually achieve that.
Yeah. Orban might be an exception in this, in his attitude towards the Russia-Ukraine war, but the one steadfast common denominator is, of course, Israel. They're all hand in hand with the Zionists, and Geert Wilders in particular.
He's a fanatic.
He's the rabid Zionist. So there you go. I had an email coming in from John Sadler. He says, "Evening, George. Just wanted to say that I don't believe any of the presidents since before JFK, who was murdered by the permanent deep state, have been in control of the country. Let's face it, if they had any real power to change the direction of the US, they wouldn't be allowed to be elected by the people. That would be too dangerous for the real power base. Starmer betrayed his own base, let alone the rest of us. Funny how a human rights lawyer can support a regime that is blowing children apart. The traitor needs to be held accountable. Hopefully one day soon."
Well, we've not got a lot of time.
No.
Not if you want chips. But you want to give me one more?
Right, just a comment on tonight's poll whether Trump okayed the Ukraine attacks on Russia. Let me go with Hill. He said, "I side with political commenting that says that Ukraine-Russia war is about largely preventing a multipolarity with a strong China and Russia at the heart of the BRICS structure. Trump chose his cabinet and he knows what their agenda in power is. He does not decide it, and he is the next handover from those war criminal president who came before him."
Yeah, but they tried so hard to stop him. They rigged the election in 2020 to make sure he didn't get a second term. They wrecked his first term with the Russiagate hoax. They tried to kill him and tried to do everything within their power to stop him being re-elected. He gets re-elected, and he's behaving like Joe Biden never left.
Well, perhaps that too was part of the greater circus.
Maybe there's something in the water there. Well, that's all we've got time for. How's our Hats Off project doing?
Wonderful.
Seems to have really taken off.
It has taken off, but people may be confused in finding it because it's got 4 Fs. Please go to Hats Off with 4 Fs.
Hats Off, O-F-F-F.
F.
There you go. Did I only do 3? Yeah, I mean, we're working hard on this, taking quite a bit of time. Gayatri's the brains behind it, but I write some of the words. And we'd appreciate it if you all followed Hats Off. That's all we've got time for. God willing, we'll be back on Sunday with the Mothership, the Sunday edition of the Mother of All Talk Shows. 3.99 million people watched Wednesday and Sunday in particular is still rising. So it'll be 4 million, but I won't rest until we've got 5. Stay tuned and see you on Sunday. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.